Brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. Informed by science, guided by insight. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.
Welcome to another episode of Honest Money. I'm hoping to use a dad joke that this is going to be an interesting topic because we're talking about interest rates and especially how are these rising and high interest rates affecting you in your daily life. And this is kind of a tricky topic for me, so I always try and kind of bring in the big guns when I can. So I'm thrilled today to invite Natalie Anderson, who's an investment specialist at Prescient Investment Management, to join us. Natalie, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Warren. It's cool to be here.
So Natalie, this when we talk about interest rates, it's kind of a sensitive topic for a lot of people who for example, have debt and they hate this idea that their debt's getting more expensive and they don't really want to kind of hear about this more. But I think it's a really key point, right? Is just from my own perspective. When you look at the world of inflation, for us in South Africa, we're a little bit used to inflation nowadays. We've had inflation all our lives, and so if you're sitting in America or in Europe or in the UK, they pretty much for almost 2 decades haven't really had to worry about inflation. It's been very low, and all of a sudden they're sitting with inflation rates that are double ours. And actually, the only real medicine for high inflation is interest rates. It's the reserve banks have to push up interest rates to solve the problem. I don't know if you feel like I've got a grip on that, or is that too simplistic?
Yeah, so I think it's just important, as you said, to take a step back and look at our current environment. You're definitely right that the Reserve Bank and central banks across the world need to raise rates to curb inflation. But why are we in this environment in the first place? Since COVID globally and in South Africa particularly, we are experiencing high inflation. And, there's so many reasons that comes about, but the main thing is due to supply and demand. So if you look at an example, say Russia invading Ukraine, Russia is one of the world's biggest oil exporters. So now that we're having a shortage in terms of that supply, it's really impacting the oil prices. And now as consumers, we feel that in our fuel prices, and I'm sure we are all really feeling that at the moment. So that's really feeding in, and that's driving up prices as well as demand for more goods and services. So that's basically how we're getting to this high inflation in the first place. And basically one of the tools that the Reserve Bank has in its toolkit is raising interest rates. That's one of the best ways to curb inflation, as you said. So yeah, you are correct in your understanding of it.
And I think just to, one thing that a lot of people, and especially, kind of our younger listeners, wouldn't necessarily appreciate is, why is inflation such a big issue? Why are we worried about it? Why don't we just ignore it?
I think as inflation pushes on, it impacts our cost of living. So basically what it does is it reduces our purchasing power. So everything becomes more expensive and our money means less to us. So it is quite a big concern for governments and central banks. It really is something that they need to get under control. Otherwise, we're going to have another Zimbabwe situation on our hands where, money means nothing. And it's really important in our economy to make sure that our purchasing power is, it holds.
So I think in pictures. So I always try and think of inflation as a really big boulder that's sitting on the top of a very steep hill, and if you let that boulder pick up any kind of speed, it becomes impossible to stop it. And then it just crushes everything in its path. And financially, that's what inflation is. So yes, interest rates going up is nasty medicine, but the illness is far worse than the medicine. So I think we're not here to kind of defend central banks. And if we thought they were making a mistake, we would say so. But certainly from my perspective, I am old enough to know what bad inflation looks like, and I don't like that. I would hate for that to repeat again. So I think it is right. I think what the central bank is doing is correct, and certainly it's interesting to know how good our central bank is, because our central bank was quite early on this. Whereas the Americans were still saying no, this is what they call transitory inflation, and it's just going to come and go. And our central bank was saying no, inflation's here to stay. We need to start raising rates, and that meant that early action by the South African Reserve Bank, kind of makes the medicine a bit easier to deal with. We didn't have to take such big doses as the rest of the world now has to deal with. They've got 18% inflation in some of the developed countries. We're complaining because of 7.5 or whatever it is. And believe me, when your food price goes up by 18% and your fuel price and your cost of your house and everything else, it doesn't take long before your money can afford to buy you absolutely nothing. And I think it's a key point in this whole thing. We have to deal with this inflation.
Yeah, I think while it hurts in the short term, it's something that is absolutely necessary for our Reserve Bank to do. We can't let it continue like this. So yeah, it's not great for consumers, but it's something that has to happen.
So what does it mean now for consumers? What should they be looking at? What should they be doing?
Basically, I actually just want to take a step back and just look at how raising rates actually reduces inflation, because I think that's also important for people to understand. So basically, an interest rate is the borrowing cost of a loan. So basically, when the banks raise interest rates, that essentially means that it becomes more expensive for consumers to borrow. So we all stop borrowing less, and as a result, we'll all stop spending less. So when people stop spending, that obviously reduces demand and supply not supply, it just reduces demand for goods and services in the economy. And as a result, that starts to drop the prices again, and therefore curbs inflation.
Okay, so let me think it through in my own life. So if I find I'm using a bit more of my monthly salary just to pay off my home loan and my car debt, etc., it means I've got less money to spend on other goods and services, and so it naturally just forces me, because of that, to spend less on let's say more discretionary items, and I have to spend it more on my food and my accommodation, my fuel, whatever the deal is. And the hope then is that because I'm spending a bit less on the other things, it slows that inflation monster down, and we get it under control again.
Yeah, if you think about it in terms of a practical example, I just read an article that said a 25% basis point increase on R1 million home loan increases your monthly payment amount by 250 Rand. So if we look at it in that way, it really does add up. And we just had a 75 basis point increase last week. So it really can affect your budget. And it's not just home loans, it's your credit card, it's your vehicle financing, it's all forms of personal credit that get affected by this. So it definitely does put a lot of pressure on the consumer budget. And the spending on non-essentials, discretionary spending is definitely going to be reduced. And so there will be some sectors like retailers, luxury goods, that's definitely going to be affected worse than other sectors, but the demand overall will reduce.
Okay, and maybe the flip side of that is that the people sitting with cash, let's say, especially older retired people who hate low interest rates, they're probably the ones that are smiling a bit more, because now their money that they've got sitting on deposit or in income funds, etc., that's going to earn them a bit more than it was in the past. So on the other side of it, for the consumers with money and with investments in broader money markets, this isn't bad news. This is good news for them.
Yeah, it definitely changes the way we view spending or saving. So when you are saving something, it's definitely, would you keep your money in a bank account or a savings account if it was going to pay you 15% rather than 10%? Would you still want to take on the risk in investing in equities if your savings account was giving you, a high rate? Would you still want to invest in that? So are you going to spend on your credit card if the interest rate goes up? I saw a stat, the average South African has 21,000 Rand on average on a credit card. And so, yeah, it definitely benefits the people that are sitting in their savings. They are earning higher interest rates. So it definitely encourages saving rather than spending.
Yeah, and I think that's that's maybe the point here is if we're taking bitter tasting medicine that we all hate. If it's giving us good outcomes, then that's maybe the way to make peace with this horrible situation we're in. We're not being punished for no reason. We're being given medicine for a potentially much bigger economically damaging problem.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of our personal investments, we can also see, if we're invested in fixed income, we are earning a higher interest rate because we are now the lenders of that fixed income. So we're getting a higher rate. Yes, rising rates are not as great because it's going to affect the capital of our fixed interest investments. But the rising rates helps with that, as opposed to equities where, people stop spending so much, businesses, they start to lose out on their earnings. So maybe their stock prices start to go down, therefore affecting the equity investment.
Yeah, and I think maybe for someone listening who has debt, and feels quite despondent about this because we're sounding so upbeat, we're not. I mean, I think it is a tough situation, but also to remember that interest rates do move in cycles. So the fact that we are in a cycle now where interest rates have been rising quite a lot, it's important to know that in the near future, who knows exactly when, we're certainly not here to make a prediction, but interest rates will stop rising at some point, whether it be in a few months or a couple, maybe a bit longer. And then at some point that cycle turns further, and then interest rates start to decline again, and then we get a bit of breathing room. So I think it's important to know that markets, whether it's interest rate markets or stock markets, they don't just go in one direction forever. So we're in a tough market now for rising rates. That will turn again, and if you're sitting with debt, just bite the bullet, try and pay off your debts as much as you can, and you will get breathing room in the future. So Natalie, I'm conscious of time. Always, these shows always fly by for me. But I just thought I wanted to give you the chance if there was something else that you wanted to discuss around interest rates before we get to my favorite question.
Yeah, I think I'll just reiterate what you just said. That while it's tough right now, and we're all taking a lot of pain because of the high interest rates, there are benefits to the rates because we need to curb inflation. So, I mean, you have from a financial advisor perspective, you can obviously say what the clients need to do, how to relook at their budgets, how to, prioritize their financial goals and how to make it work in the interim. But it's not all doom and gloom because, as you say, it will turn around.
Okay, great. Thank you, Natalie. And then to my favorite question for all our new guests, if you were to meet yourself now coming, kind of hitting the job market for the first time, or maybe even earlier, even leaving varsity, whatever you would like to kind of picture yourself at, what would be the one lesson you would like to teach your younger self now with the benefit of your experience that you've gathered?
Well, I wish I could go back 10 years ago and teach myself about the importance of the time value of money, because I really think as a young person, you don't understand how important it is to start saving when you're young, and how those monthly, even if it's a tiny little monthly contribution, when we all start working, we all think we're poor, we can't afford to save, but it's actually one of the most important things you can do is just to start young. And I wish I could go back and start.
I think I hope someone's listening to you that's about to start their first working month, and they take that message, because it's such a powerful message to land. So Natalie Anderson, thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks so much, Warren.
Brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. Informed by science, guided by insight. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.